This video may contain spoilers until version 4.7, including world quests, Archon quests, and of course the open world.
One thing I love about Genshin is how layered its storytelling is. By focusing on the Archon quests alone, you get a superficial narrative understanding of the story, but the details, needed to understand not only what happens but how it happens, the underlying mechanisms and their implications, are buried and scattered around the map, hidden in world quest dialogue, books, artifacts, and interactables. Today, I want to shed some light on some of these hidden layers. By the end of this video, I hope to give you a better understanding of the seal of chemical marriage and its parts, the how of both Egeria's original sin and Neuvilette's act of forgiveness, the concept of will, and how all of this could help explain the very nature of the human realm and exactly how the contents of Irminsul affect the reality of Teyvat. I will be providing timestamps in case you want to revisit, skip, or navigate to any given section. I will also leave links in the description in case you want to follow up on any of the topics we will discuss. And of course, the lines between explanation, interpretation, and speculation might easily become blurred, so take everything with a good measure of salt. Before we dive in, I need to address a change you probably already noticed if you are a returning viewer. I've decided to move away from using AI voices for narrating my scripts. AI voices were convenient and offered a more neutral accent compared to my own, but they offer little control over pacing and emphasis and pronunciation. Plus, with the rise of AI-generated content on YouTube, I've realized I much prefer listening to real human voices, even if they're not from professional voice actors. My apologies if you missed the old narrator voices, but thank you for your understanding. With that out of the way, I invite you to get comfortable, grab your cup of coffee or tea or whatever your beverage of choice may be, and let me be your guide as we dive deep into Teyvat's metaphysics. As you might remember from the Narcissenkreuz quest series, the plan of Renée and the Narcissenkreuz Ordo involved a so-called seal of chemical marriage, composed of two parts, a tree of emanation and a circle of 4 orthants. The 4 orthants refer to 4 hypothetical substances: memory, wishes, soul, and persona. We used a materialized version of these abstract substances, together with a touch of the power of will, to forge the Holy Blade of Narcissenkreuz. The same 4 concepts are mentioned in one of the interactable notes hidden in the depth of fallen Remuria. These notes were written by Boethius, and they read as follows.
Aurelius once divided all phenomena into 4 categories: substance, property, quality, and relation. Quality is the keystone, which is what often is called the Quadrant of Qualities: memories, wishes, soul, and persona.
And with that, I welcome you to today's rabbit hole. Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor, but more importantly for our purposes, he was also a Stoic philosopher. As it turns out, the Stoics did indeed define 4 ontological categories or genera, through which any item of reality could be defined. First, a substrate. This category refers to the passive underlying matter or the base material that things and beings are made of. Second, something qualified. These are the properties that give an object its identifiable features, such as color, texture and size, or personality traits, cognitive abilities, and so on. Third, disposition. Disposition refers to the state or condition in which something exists or the arrangement of its parts. This captures more transient or conditional states of being, like being bent or broken, or being healthy or sick. And finally, relative disposition concerns the relationships or relative positions between things. It involves how one entity is related to others, such as being next to, on top of, bigger than, or farther off. Substance and quality are the more interesting categories, as they are more at the core of what any given thing or entity actually is. Substance is referred to as the passive component, while quality is applied to the passive substance by an active component that permeates matter and gives it form. Throughout Stoic texts, substance is referred to as ousia, which literally means substance or essence, while the active component that permeates matter and instills quality in it is named pneuma, which means breath or spirit. Now, I think the definition of these genera as adapted by Genshin Impact differs slightly from the original Stoic definition, but in a way that probably makes things a bit easier to understand. While the Stoics would say that even the characteristic of redness that an apple may exhibit belongs to the category of quality, the Quadrant of Qualities presented to us in-game is composed exclusively of concepts that we attribute to mental and/or spiritual dimensions. So, for the sake of simplicity and pragmatism, for the rest of this video we will be using the following adapted version of the Stoic genera. We will use substance to refer to the matter or the physical stuff of the material world, and quality to refer to the mental or spiritual aspects of living beings. The redness of an apple or the hardness of a rock will belong for us in the category of property. In this adapted definition, substance and quality are a closer match with other concepts that should be more familiar to us, like the material and the immaterial, the body and the mind, substance and spirit, ousia and pneuma. There's a conundrum in the real world that has kept philosophers busy for thousands of years, and that is whether the experiential, spiritual or mental is completely reducible to the physical or not. In modern terms, is your mind just a byproduct of your brain and nothing more? Or are there different and possibly independent realities at play? In Genshin, we can skip a lot of this discussion because we know, for a fact, that you do not necessarily need a brain or even a physical body in order to have a mind. Raiden A abandoned her body and attached her consciousness to the Musso Ishim. In other words, she separated her quality from her substance and reattached it to another substance. In a very similar fashion, the God King Remus separated his followers from their mortal bodies and gave them new immortal ones. Their quality was preserved, same memories, wishes, souls, and persona, but attached to a different substance with different properties. We were able to have a chat with Elinas, and he is clearly brainless, and Basher's victims were able to get revenge even after their substance dissolved and returned to the primordial waters. Basher was physically unharmed, his substance was unscathed, but his quality, his mind, is what suffered from this vengeance. Now that we have a better understanding of the higher level categories of substance, quality, property, and relation, let's turn our gaze back to the Quadrant of Qualities. Quality is the most important category, the keystone, because it is what really defines the identity of a being, the self. Let's start with persona. In most languages it is translated as personality, and I would understand it as such. Most of a person's identity will be attributed to their persona. It is what makes someone a someone, what makes them able to make sense of the terms you and me. This is why Cassiodor was surprised when Phobos turned out to have a persona that could be directly interacted with in terms of you and me. Memory is mostly self-explanatory, but also extremely important to the general story. After all, it is memory that is collected by the ley lines and stored within Irminsul. We will get back to this. When Arlecchino executed the deserting members of the House of the Hearth, she did so by eliminating their memories. In her view, this is akin to dying. Losing your memory certainly means you lose the continuity in your life. However, your soul is still the same. Your persona and your wishes are probably more or less preserved, though I would argue that memory influences them both to a degree. Wishes is probably that which is related to a person's dreams and ambitions, and therefore the anchor for the vision system. Often the moment when someone is granted a vision is described as the person's wishes reaching the heavens. Finally, soul. If you die and are later reborn, the one thing in common between your last life and the next is the soul. Even if your personality and your memories and your wishes are different, In Gnostic terms, the soul is what contains a spark of divinity that is trapped in the material world. It seems likely that it is the soul that is bound by fate. Soul is ultimately what makes you you, even if and when everything else should fade. One last example before we move on. The Clervy we interacted with was a shadow projected into the world. She had no substance and could not physically interact with reality. She had a fixed fragment of memory. She maintained the wish of escaping the House of the Hearth, a wish that once belonged to the real Clervy. But Clervy's soul was not with this shadow, so she was neither alive, nor was she really Clervy. Alright, I think we are now ready to revisit Egeria's original sin and the primordial sea. After Egeria created Oceanids, she sent them out all over Teyvat. But the Oceanids saw and envied human life, so they begged Egeria to help them become human too. She granted their wish by filling their blood vessels with primordial seawater, which gave them human form, and this, we are told, was Egeria's sin. But what exactly is it that the Oceanids envied? What is it that humans have and Oceanids lack? And what exactly was sinful about Egeria's act? By infusing the Oceanids with primordial water, she gave them permanent human form. She fixed their substance to become almost indistinguishable from that of other humans. But I don't think this was the sinful part. After all, some of the more powerful Oceanids can mimic human form pretty convincingly, and we don't see the heavenly principles rushing down to punish them for it. I think what they envied and lacked was the full quality of the human experience. Having interacted with Oceanids before, I think it's safe to say that they do have personalities. They have memories, and they also have wishes. It was their wish to become human that Egeria responded to after all. So, besides the substance that humans are made of, the only quality they could be lacking is a soul. A hint that souls could be provided by the primordial sea can be found in the description of the Hydrotulpa.
Countless wills dissolved in the water, which, like the universe, was full of souls that wished to be born.
By using primordial water, Egeria did two things. She used the organizing principle Pneuma to permanently infuse the Oceanid's substance, Ousia, which was pure hydro, with human form. But more importantly, and more sinfully, she completed their Quadrant of Qualities by providing each Oceanid with a soul. And this is what made them really alive and really human, and what made Egeria a sinner in the eyes of Celestia. I want to stay on the topic of Oceanids a little bit longer because I think they can help us understand another very important concept that is thrown around a lot within the lore of the game since the release of the Sumeru Desert, the concept of will. To be a Descender, you need to fulfill two conditions. Be an Outlander that is not of this world, and have a will that can rival this world. A will that can create, destroy, sustain, or protect a world. I don't know about you, but at first, I interpreted the concept of power of will in the way it is commonly used in everyday language, as having a strong determination. But the meaning intended by the game is different. It's not about determination, it is about manifestation. To understand this, I want to steer your attention to one of the more hidden references within the game. In page 11 of the enigmatic pages, René, or rather Narzissenkreuz at this point, makes a reference to three different literary works. Matrimony of chemistry is another wording for chemical marriage, and refers to the chemical marriage of Christian Rosenkreuz, one of the three foundational Rosicrucian manifestos, and a Pandora box we shall not open today. The Forest in the Mirror is one of countless references to Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll, found throughout the entire questline. And The Circular Ruins is the title of a well-known short story by the Argentinian author Luis Borges. I totally recommend reading it, it's a masterpiece and only 5 pages long. In order not to spoil the story, I will only reveal the premise, but that is all we need here. A man arrives at a temple with only one goal: to dream another man in such minute detail as to impose that man into reality. And that power of manifestation is the real meaning of a will, the ability to modify reality not by means of physical intervention, but by manifesting that change willfully. Even if Oceanids might lack a soul, something they do possess to a degree is this power of will. Of course, not even close to the level of a descender, just enough to impose form onto Hydro to mimic life, or if the Oceanid is powerful and intelligent enough, to manifest a domain. When forging the Holy Blade of Metaphysics, Ant's touch was required to combine the 4 quality substances into the sword and imbue it with a will. Also, after the first time we visited the Anapausis and got kicked out again by Marianne/Lyris, we attempted to return to it twice. Both times, Oceanid Anne was asked to use her imagination in order to modify the reality of the domain we were in. This entire part of the quest was literally a battle of will between 2 different yet closely related Oceanids. At the culmination of this battle, when Anne's will no longer could break through Marianne's will, we had to use the Holy Sword, which cuts through all will, to destroy the final manifested barrier. Now, while it's clear that Marianne/Lyris was the master of the domain, keeping it in place, we did learn that Lyris by herself would probably be unable to manifest such complexity, because she wasn't smart enough. This is a very important point to remember. In order to manifest something into reality, you need not only the necessary amount of power of will, but you also need to be able to hold the complexity of the thing you're manifesting in your mind. Only the most powerful Oceanids, like Egeria for example, are able to mimic humans because of this restriction. In the case of the Anapausis domain, being a combination of the Oceanid Lyris and the late human Marianne, Lyris provided the necessary will required for manifestation, and Marianne provided the memory and cognitive capacity to envision such a complex domain. Keeping in mind this definition of the power of will as a power of manifestation, it appears we have already witnessed an example of this kind of power in action. With his authority restored, Neuvilette was able to forgive the people of Fontaine, which is something the Hydro Archon could not do. But how exactly did he do this? Unlike the Archons, Neuvilette is not bound by the heavenly principles. One of his character stories reads,
"Now that he has obtained 1 part of 7 of the authority over the mortal realm and reforged the throne and title of a fully fledged dragon, he is one strong enough to equal and rival the human realm."
The phrasing sounds a lot like the description of the will of a descender. Of course, Neuvilette is probably not a descender, as he is not an outlander, and even if he may not have a will that can rival the entire world, his authority at least allows him to enforce his will unto both Hydro and the primordial sea. When explaining how he had saved the people of Fontaine from dissolving, he said,
"But so long as those primordial energies remain within them, I could use the ancient dragon's authority to grant them true blood, after the fashion in which life was first brought into being on this planet. In other words, when I gave my verdict, Fontainians became true humans."
Giving Fontainians true blood in place of primordial water was a fundamental change in reality. I think it would make sense that this change was brought forth not by some kind of conveniently unexplained chemical reaction, but simply by Neuvilette willing this change with his renewed authority over all waters. Alright, everything we have covered so far was necessary to build up to this final section. Be warned that things will quickly become more and more speculative here. Worst case, consider it food for thought, just for fun. Best case, and this might renew our understanding of the game world. Something that has been bothering me for a long time was how difficult it seemed to reconcile the fact that on one hand, reality can be modified by changes in Irminsul, which makes the world seem like a virtual simulation of sorts, with the fact that the world was literally taken over from the dragon sovereigns in a way that very much suggests a physical reality, not a virtual simulation. Not to mention that descenders like our traveler appear to physically travel into this world. This symbol seems to finally offer an explanation that fits both sides of this coin. So far we have focused mostly on the Circle of Orthants, and to be fair, so did the Natusenkreuz Ordo. But it's time to tackle the Tree of Emanation. Since the Circle of Orthants represents the category of quality, I find it likely that the Tree of Emanation corresponds to the substance side of things. The tree might offer insight into how the current physical world came into being and/or is being sustained. Let's begin by comparing the Tree of Emanation symbol in the game with its real-life inspiration, the Tree of Life from Kabbalah. The Tree of Life depicts 10 Sephirot or emanations. These Sephirot represent different attributes or aspects of the divine, arranged in a specific structure. They are interconnected to illustrate the flow of divine energy from the infinite at the top, down to the physical manifestation of the material world at the bottom. The divine flows from the top node Keter, down through each Sephirot until the final path from Sephirot number 9, Yesod, to the final level, Malchut, results in the physically manifested reality. Not only is each Sephirot imbued with complex meaning in Kabbalistic traditions, but so is each of the 22 connections between them. To avoid overwhelming detail, let's focus our analysis on the differences between the Tree of Emanation in the Seal of Chemical Marriage and the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. First, regarding the Sephirot themselves, it is noteworthy that the bottom two nodes, Yesod and Malchut, are covered or replaced in their positions by the center and top nodes of the Circle of Qualities. The connections are still there, indicating that these nodes are still part of the tree, but this overlap could be extremely significant. To unravel this, we first need to identify the meaning of the top Orthant and the center of the circle. We can infer which of the 4 Orthants is at the top from the projection of the seal onto fontaine, which places the Orthant of Memory at this position. The center of the circle is marked with a symbol closely resembling some variants of the Rosicrucian cross, and corresponds to the position of the Tower of Ipsissimus on the map. Since forging the Holy Sword required the 4 Orthants and the power of will, we can assume will is represented by the center of the circle. This is further confirmed by the description of the tower itself.
The Tower of Ipsissimus comes from an old concept from the ancient Fontanian kingdom of Remuria, and was used to describe a powerful will that could rule, sustain, and destroy the world.
So, we have memory on the Sephirot Yesod, which is also called foundation, and will on the Sephirot Malchut, that represents the manifested physical world. Memory as the foundation, and will as manifestation. If we think back to the Anapausis, we saw that the cognitive capacity that holds what is to be manifested and the will that materializes that information do not necessarily have to come from the same original source. It was Lyris's will that brought Marianne's memories and fantasy to life in the form of a domain. Now, imagine how difficult it must be to will an entire world into existence. You would have to be able to imagine everything in such detail as to encapsulate everything and every being in that world. Unless you can outsource the information needed to define what is to be manifested into an external repository of sorts. Something like a tree that stores memories. Then that tree would be the foundation for the reality manifested by a powerful descender-level will. If the reality we find ourselves in is a manifestation enforced by a will that can create or sustain a world, and the data that informs this manifestation is drawn from Irminsul, it no longer feels so strange that a modification in Irminsul is directly and immediately reflected in reality, and that it affects everyone that belongs to the same manifestation, but not a witness from beyond. This also fits beautifully with the nature of the Loom of Fate, and the fact that its incomplete version acts on the level of memories, while its completed form can affect reality by weaving new ley lines, which are directly connected to Irminsul. Finally, for the sake of completion, let's take a look at another striking difference between the Tree of Life of Kabbalah and the Tree of Emanation in the game. There are two particular connections missing in the game version. Connections number 10 and 12, or rather 20 and 22 because the traditional numbering begins at 11, as the 10 Sphira are themselves counted first. To be honest, there isn't enough material here to sustain a solid theory as to what this difference might mean, and there are different interpretations of each path, so all I can offer here is some tentative guesses, but here we go. The first connection is called Yod, and relates to the concept of the hand, the operator or operation, the active creator energy that knows how to use divine creativity and intelligence to act upon and form the primordial soup. This connection being removed could possibly indicate that the original creator has been removed from the equation, or that the method of creation is no longer the original one. And the second missing connection is called Lamed, and is associated with spiritual learning. This path being removed would fit neatly with Samsara constellation theories, meaning that the original divine path for spiritual evolution has been replaced, for example, by refinement over samsara cycles enforced by an Irminsul-generated cyclical reality.
The Nartissenkreuz Ordo believes that people continuously refine themselves through samsara cycles. This evolution refers to spiritual evolution.
Alright, that's it. This is really all I can offer for now. If you have made it this far, thank you kindly for the view. Do let me know your thoughts and theories on all this. Take care. See you next time.